Returning, let me mention, I think some of you noticed Sunday we didn't have the right amount of heat, and we do have an air conditioner that's our heat unit that's out. And I'll be talking with the men very quickly after the service tonight. It's going to cost about 20% to fix this old unit, and than it would to buy a new one. So we're going to be talking about that. But hopefully we'll not have need of a heater much longer. But we do want to get it fixed. And I didn't turn it on tonight. It may be cold in here for some of you, but I didn't turn it on even tonight. But anyway, the Kovashes are back in Brazil. Got an email from them today, and so they're back in Brazil, and we thank the Lord for that. Psalm 21, I preached on this about 8 years ago, if my notes and notations are correct. But yesterday I began to pray about the message for tonight, because I wasn't settled in what I was working on. And the Lord kind of dealt with me about the subject of when all hope is gone, help is on the way. And boy, I just kept coming back to this particular passage. And, when the world can't do anything for you, God can. And we've got to understand that He's the one that's in charge. He's the one that's in control. Miss Maria there in the hospital, unless something changes, she won't have to have surgery. The blockage are gone. She hoped she'd go home Tuesday. Then she said probably Thursday, but she's hoping for Wednesday. And she just has to eat enough Jell-O and clear broth to go to the bathroom. And once she does that and everything else is all right, they're going to let her go. I believe that was the Lord. I believe it was. She's had surgery before for the same problem, and this time the Lord took care of it. And sometimes He does work through doctors. Other times He works Himself. And however He does it, that's in His hand. And I thank the Lord that He's the one in control, because if I was making decisions, I'd make the wrong decision. Y'all going to have to forgive me for a minute. I was trying to keep a cough drop in, and it creates too much saliva. I'm going to start spitting. Psalm 121. None of you are close enough, but I didn't want to get it all over the pulpit. I may need a spit cover. Anyway, it'll be either a yellowish or clear. It won't be the other color. All right. Did everyone get one of the handouts tonight? Did anyone not get a handout? If you did not, please put your hand up. We have some back there. Did you get a handout? Yeah, get some handouts, brother. I just get some, bring them up, all walk around. I try to have a handout on Wednesday night, sometimes Sunday night, and I didn't Sunday at all. Tonight, I believe that the Lord would have me to use this one. I made mention last week of a picture of a pelican, and I'm not sure it's a pelican, maybe a crane, but trying to swallow a frog, and the frog choking the pelican. And that's the picture that I put on here. Don't ever give up, because help's on the way. You see, that's the thing that we have to remember, is that we might be just an inch or two away from victory. In many of yours, maybe in all of them, there's a poem in the middle there. And it says, don't quit. I always thought Edgar Guest wrote that poem, but this poem evidently some lady wrote, and it either is very similar to what he wrote or it's just slightly different. And don't quit. Don't give up. You're this close to victory. This close to victory. And if you just trust the Lord. Now, if it's time to go to the doctor, go to the doctor. Don't you stay home. All right? If it's time to go to the doctor, you go to the doctor. I'm not suggesting that. If you got a sick baby, you get in the car and go to the doctor and pray while you're on the way there. If the Lord heals that baby while you're on the way there, that's a great thing. But if He uses the doctor, that's a great thing too. And God's used doctors to perform miracles. The doctors have no idea why those people lived and why things turned out the way they did. But we know God's still in control. He's still in charge. And we have a great God. Don't give up. Help's on the way. Don't give up with your children. Sometimes we get frustrated with our kids. I'm talking about I'm talking about adults, not just the younger generation. And I mean, I'm talking about the older generation. Sometimes we get frustrated with them. You know, they don't seem to maybe do all the things we'd want them to do. And boy, if they don't call every day, I get frustrated at them. I want them to talk to their mother every day. They don't have to talk to me, but I want them to talk to their mother every day. Sad to say, I only talk to my mother probably every other day, but I do call her nearly every day and talk to her just a few minutes. And but that's something that I get frustrated real quick. I don't give up on them. And when one of them gets out of church, I don't give up on them. I keep praying. Hey, listen, I want to see him in heaven. I want to see him get a few rewards. Hey, and I want to see him raising them grandkids in such a way that them grandkids are going to get saved at an early age, and that they're going to grow up not being involved in all the ungodliness that others have gotten into. And they can get saved at an early age. And I want to see them living that kind of a life. I want to see them, and if they're not, I get frustrated pretty quick. And I think Miss Jan probably tells them quicker than I do if they're not doing right. But we let them know, hey, we love you, but this is what you need to be doing. We find throughout in the Bible that there are cases that look like they're impossible cases. Man, when we see where Jesus gets out of the ship there at the Gadarenes, and all of a sudden there was a man that met him that was possessed of devils. I mean, the world had an impossible situation. You remember what was going on there. The fact that this man was a wild man. He was out of his mind. He tore his clothes off. He was living in caves. By the way, saved and sane people wear clothing. They don't run around naked or half naked, all right? And but this guy, they had chained him with fetters, and that's some strong chains they chain animals with. But he was demon possessed. And I don't know if you've ever been around somebody demon possessed, but some of them have superhuman power. Those demons give them that kind of a power. I've been around it. I've seen the power that some of them have, and you don't want to be around it, I promise you. But he could break those chains that would hold animals, and they were scared of him. And Jesus comes on the scene, and this fellow runs up to Jesus. And the demons said, you know, why'd you come to bother us before our time? You know, they knew their time of judgment wasn't yet, but they knew they was going to be judged. And of course what happens is Jesus cast them out. They went into the swine, the hogs, and them hogs ran over a cliff down into the water and drowned themselves. And anybody with good sense doesn't want demons or anything demonic around them. And that's why we ought to stay away from places that are demonic. I'm not going to give you a list, but you probably got some things going in your mind right now, some places you ought not be, because it looks like demons hang out there. And they probably do hang out there. Hopefully they don't get in the door, but I'm going to tell you, if they could, they'd get in the door. If they could, they'd work in your family. We need to stay away from those kind of things. Throughout the Bible, we find this. I have on the front there, Ephesians chapter number 2, verse 4 and 5. But God, who is rich in mercy. You see, it is a hopeless case, except for one thing. God is rich in mercy. Now, sometimes, honestly, Christians have to extend mercy to people they don't really want to. They've offended us. They've done wrong. And sometimes we have to extend mercy to those people. And the only way they see the love of God is if mercy is extended to them. Now, make sure you're in God's will. Make sure you do all that properly. But we need to do that if that's what the Lord has for us to do. Look in Psalm chapter number 121. It says that under the title on most of yours, under the verse or the chapter heading, it says a song of degrees. Now, all that means is that within it, it takes one step and moves to another step and moves to another step and moves to another step. Literally means a way to go up or a staircase or a ladder. It can be translated any of those ways. It means a moving upward, a staircase or a ladder. Here's what it says in verse 1, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help. And I want to stop there for just a minute. The hills did not have any help. He said, I will lift up mine eyes. Then he says, unto the hills. And then he says this as a question, I believe, as a statement, an exclamatory, from whence cometh my help? When they were at this point, this psalm was written for the Jewish people when they were traveling for their 3 feasts. Pentecost, Tabernacles, and one other right there before or after. I don't remember which one the other one is right now. But for these 3 feasts, they were commanded to go to Jerusalem. And they would come up and down mountains because Israel is a mountainous place. And when they get to this place where they were looking up to the hill of Jerusalem, the mountain, behind them they were always also looking up at hills. Once you got down the valley a ways, you were looking at hills again or mountains again. And I believe what this verse is teaching us is that we're either going into on a mountain or coming out of a mountain. We're either in a valley or climbing a mountain, no matter what stage of life we're in, no matter what else is going on. And when the psalmist says that I will look unto the hills from whence cometh my help. It's not the hills. Not in Jerusalem on a regular basis. But most of the false idols were worshipped on top of mountains. For some reason, the people think that the closer they get onto a mountain, the closer they get to God. And in the Old Testament, you remember the Tower of Babel? And they said, let us build a city that reaches God. You can't reach God that way. We reach God by faith, and then He reaches us. That's the way it is. That's the way it has to be. And here they are. They're looking to the hills. There's no protection from them in the hills. Now, when they get up to Jerusalem, it is the city of God. It is the place where God dwells and all the rest of that. But they're not looking to the hills. They're not looking to the gods of the hills for any help or for any answer. Then, if you will, now look at verse number 2, where he says, my help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. Not the hills, but my help cometh from the Lord. Who is the Lord? Who is he talking about? He's not talking about Allah. He's not talking about Buddha. He's not talking about Confucius or any false prophet or false god. He's talking about the Lord God who is creator of all the heavens and all the earth. He is the one that we receive our help from. Now, I want to go back to the Song of Degrees. Verses 1 and 2 have words in them that show us that those two are together. Because he lifts up his eyes unto the hills from whence cometh his help. Verse 2, my help cometh from the Lord. So the word help is in both of these. Those two are the first step in this Song of Degrees. The second step is in verse 3 and 4. And we'll try to read through these so that you'll see them, and I may ask you to find the next one. But in verse 3 and 4, he will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Okay? In verse 4, behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. So what is the next Song of Degree, the next step? It is that the Creator that we talked about in verse number 1, the next step builds on that. He is the one who never sleeps. He is the one who never slumbers. So now you've taken your second step. You're trusting the Creator in verse number 1. In verse number 2, you're trusting Him with everything, with your life. You can go to sleep at night knowing that He's awake. I read an illustration today, and I think I used this illustration maybe about 8 years ago, maybe when I preached a message similar to this, but it was about the World War II, and in Germany, the Americans were bombing Germany. And, well, I think of Miss Pamplin. She told us the other day about when she was, I think she was 12 years old, when the Americans were bombing Germany. And she was, of course, a German there in Germany. And, but the story says that they were bombing Germany, and said after the air raid and the bombing was over, said they began to try to find everybody in the city. And they found everyone but one elderly lady, and they said her name was Miss Smith. They called her Uma. I don't remember what grandma is now in German. Smith and Oma. And so they couldn't find her. And boy, they looked and they looked and they looked, and finally the house that was bombed down that she lived in, except for looked like there might be one room. They pulled some debris against a window, and if you know anything about the houses in Germany, they're built wall to wall. One wall is yours. That other side of that same wall is your neighbor's. Okay, but they finally got the debris away, and they looked in. They said she's in the bed, but she must be dead. She's not moving. So they got in the window and turned her over, and she said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Didn't you hear the air raid and the bombs?" She said, "Well, if the Lord's awake, there's no sense in me losing any sleep." They claimed that actually happened. And I can believe it. Hey, years ago, there was a Lebanese lady. We called her Miss Bibi Shamal. She worked with child evangelism in Lebanon. She had come to the States after one of those terrible, terrible air raids. And in the apartment building that she was holding her, what we would call backyard Bible club, her and the kids were in there during the bombing. 3/4 of the building, and we saw the picture of the building, 3/4 of the building bombed and destroyed. And when the air raid and the bombing was over, she starts out with the kids and says, "Well, we're going to have to be careful." They didn't even know it had been bombed. They had no idea. They were inside, and God had put a hedge around them. The day she told that at our church, we had some Arabic, some Lebanese people come to our church, and we put her in a room with them. I knew that I was going to have to take the rest of the service. I have to understand, and I don't know if it's this way now, but in that way, Muslims would take an oath. They came to America. If one of them left the faith, the other one took an oath to kill that other one. And she knew she had to deal secretly. And so they came, and we had talked with them on the streets, and they said, "We'll be there, but we have to be here at this time. We have to leave at a certain time, and nobody else can know." And so we put them in a room, and there in the room had somebody standing by the door. I held the rest of our service up front. The electricity went off in our building. I'm talking about the auditorium was out, the Sunday school rooms, the hallway, all the way back. We had a Christian school. The power was out. And one of our men, of course, was standing there at the hallway at that door. One of our deacons went back to check on them, and there was a light under the door in there. The fellow said, "I ain't opening that door. I'm not going in." He come back and he said, "Y'all, we better pray." Said, "The light's on in that one room." In that one room. And it was on in that one room. When the service was over, the power come back on. They come out, had no idea the lights had been out, because the light stayed on in the room they was in. One of them got saved. He had to leave. We talked it over. The other one was going to tell, and we talked it over. I said, "We'll find a place." I called a preacher, sent him to another preacher. I said, "Don't tell me where he goes." But we had to send him away, and because the other one had taken an oath to kill him. It's an amazing thing what God can do and does do for His honor and for His glory. So why don't He keep our lights on all the time? We don't need them on all the time. It's not a Muslim getting saved, and we don't need them all the time. It amazes me. But anyway, the step, you can trust God. And verses 5 and 6, "The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. Does anyone want to take a guess at what that step is, what that degree is there? In verse 5, the Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. And of course, it's his, go ahead. The shadow, the shade, the Lord protects us, no matter what the situation is. Verse 6 is controversial to some folk. It's not to me. But he is my keeper, so we can go ahead and sleep. He is the shade upon our right hand. History tells us the right hand was where military men held the sword. Very few left-handed men fought in battles left-handed. Why did they do that? Because they fought in companies and in lines. Left-handed men were taught to fight right-handed so that there would be a shield, a sword, a shield, a sword, a shield, a sword, rather than two swords at each other. And so history tells us that the right hand was where the sword was. And here it says that the Lord's a keeper. He is thy shade upon thy right hand. The hand of power, the hand of authority, the hand of the fight. God takes care of that. Then it says, the sun shall not smite thee by day. We understand that, sunstrokes and all that. But nor the moon by night. Now, in your outline, if you want to turn, I don't remember where it's at. I'll see if I can find it. On the bottom right, on the inside there. The Greek word for moonstroke, not sunstroke, but moonstroke. The Greek word for moonstroke is selenopolexia. And I just copied a little bit out of the dictionary in order to give you what it says about moonstrokes. You say, people have strokes during the moon? Yes and no. The moonstroke, there was some medical information that full moons, that there is I think it's a 0.05% more strokes. 0.05, it's a very small amount. I read it just one article on that today. But it's not talking about that. It's talking about what they believed in that day, true or not, I'm not going to judge it, but they believed in that day that the moon could cause you to become a lunatic. Lunar being for the moon, tick being insane, lunatic. They believed that in that day. Many people would not sleep with their head uncovered in case the moon would shine in on them. Our policemen tell us that during times of full moon there is more criminal activity. It could be just because there's more light for them to see, but I don't think that's it. I think that their brain has problems and that there's a slight difference on a full moon on the brain, and I think that's what it is. We've had teachers tell us that kids act different during the season of full moons. And it does. It works that way. It's all not proven by science. They won't accept it. But that's what was believed. And God tells them, hey, I'll even take care of you during the day. I'll take care of you during the night. And if it's not true, if there's no such thing as lunatic or a moonstroke, if there's no such thing as that, God has even taken care of their fears. Not reality, but their fears. Then verses 7 and 8, and with this we'll have to close. You can read the outline later. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. Well, I'll tell you, to think about this, how that the Lord preserves us. You see, we are bought with a price, and then we're sealed by the Holy Spirit of promise unto the day of redemption. He preserves us. Now, you see, each step is a step of faith, and you're growing closer to God all the way through. And we're talking about our help. And it tells us who our help is. It's the Lord, the Creator. It tells us what the Creator is doing for us in this life, and that He is keeping us until eternity. He said He'll preserve us from all evil. Does that mean Christians don't have bad things happen to them? It doesn't mean that. Boy, as I was studying this, I thought today, over the ministry, I've been threatened with knives, been threatened with guns. I've been threatened. A fellow told me he was going to run me off the road. This fellow didn't even hear me preach. I got up and preached one Sunday morning in Hammond, Louisiana. I was pastor of the Liberty Baptist Church. And the Lord put on my heart to preach against immorality and people having married men slipping around to other women, other men's wives, and all that. And I just preached against it. And I said, these men, the Bible is very clear. If that's their lifestyle, they're going to hell. They're not true believers. They just want to act like true believers and live like the devil. That afternoon, a fellow called me. He said, they tell me you preached against me this morning. I said, who told you that? He said, the woman I'm slipping around with. Now, there I know, we had 170-some people in church that morning. Now, I know that there's a woman in church slipping around with some idiot. I get up at night and say, hey, listen, I don't know who you are. If you're here tonight, but I'm going to tell you. If you're slipping around, I said, I had some fool call me today and tell me he's going to run me off the road for preaching against him. Preaching against men that go around and find silly women. And if you're one of them, then that's exactly what you are. You're as big a fool as he is. I found out after church when everybody else was gone. I got another earful. And I said, good thing. And they weren't members. They did have a position in the school, and I didn't even know they weren't members until that night. And they didn't have a position in our school after that either. The Lord preserve thee from all evil. Evil can happen. But he'll preserve our soul. Verse number 8, the Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and forevermore. You know, we sing the song, he's got the whole world in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, you and me, sister, in his hands. Don't give up. Just take a next step. You say, but you know, I got all this going on in my life. Just take the next step and believe God. It's a song of degrees. Take the next one. The children of Israel would sing this the night before they started the climb. And it was a climb with a road. It wasn't rock climbing. But before they started that last incline journey up to the city of Jerusalem, they sang this that last night. Because they knew they was in God's hands. Part of this, I was reminded that he protects us. When they said they looked to the hills from whence cometh their help, and their help, of course, from the Creator. You remember the story of the Good Samaritan. In those days, the thieves and the robbers would hide behind the rocks and in the hills. And as people would get slowed down making their climb, they would jump out and beat them up. These people were taking sacrifices. They were taking gifts and offerings to the temple. And they knew they could be beat up, robbed. But they also knew the one who they were taking the sacrifices to. Yeah, the one was beat up and the Good Samaritan helped him. We know that. But God can keep that from happening too. Remember that he's in control, and don't give up. On your kids, on your family, don't give up. Keep praying. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed. Tonight, if there's an